Our next guest, we're going to be looking at just how far people will go. I mean, I think it's an important topic we're going to talk about next. Really, how far people will go to sort of dodge so-called germs, and we're going to talk to our guest, fascinating guest, Dr. Zoe Williams, who's an NHS GP, TV personality, and also podcast host as well. So, what's the rundown, Dr. Zoe, around sort of people ducking and diving and dodging germs where they can?
I think the top line is that us Brits will go to some lengths to avoid getting winter bugs. And I know we're going into spring now, but there are a number of winter bugs that are very much still around. So this research asked 2,000 Brits how they are avoiding getting winter bugs. And it was research conducted by Sterimar. And some of the interesting stats, 34% of people would switch train carriages if somebody close to them was coughing and sneezing. 20% say they avoid public transport altogether in order to avoid these seasonal bugs. A third of people avoid touching door handles. So coming out of the loo, they'll use their elbow or a bit of tissue. And the one I think that surprised me the most is that 57%, so quite a lot, over half of people will cancel plans with family or friends if their family or friends are showing signs of illness. So it shows that we're really, are prioritizing staying well, often over social interactions with the people that we care about.
Yeah, I can see the rationale, Doctor, there. I mean, I suppose, people might have to go to work. They can't afford to get ill. And you might have an athlete, for example, preparing for a big event or a big game, and the last thing you need is to have a flu. And, I can see, and also I think that I stand corrected. I haven't seen any research on it, but maybe the pandemic had a big impact on people's thoughts and feelings too, where I got to admit myself, anecdotally, personally, before the pandemic, I was sort of weary if I'm on a plane or a train and someone's coughing and sneezing. But, I do think that, including myself, there was like a pivotal moment where that pandemic really, you just become a lot more aware if someone's behind you on a queue coughing or sneezing, and or someone walks into work who's coughing and sneezing. Is that a fair shout, do you think, Doctor, where maybe that kind of...
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on, Jimmy. So they did ask about that in the research as well. And 2/3 of people said that since the pandemic, they're more conscious of themselves getting infected by other people. But similarly, 2/3 of people are more self-conscious if they themselves are unwell, around taking precautions and being aware, trying to reduce the risk of transmitting an illness to other people. And I think we're at a point where people are taking such lengths to avoid getting ill that it is a good idea to do what we can to prevent getting ill and to prevent getting others ill. But it does need to be balanced as well, so that we're not letting it interfere too much with our lives, so that we still have good quality of life. However, it's really important that I mention there is, at the moment, a significant surge of cases of norovirus, which is the winter vomiting bug, causes vomiting, diarrhea, fever, to the extent that it's putting a real pressure on the NHS. And it's slightly unusual for it to be so significant at this time of year. But with norovirus, the winter vomiting bug, if you think you have that, it is really important that you do isolate, stop it spreading to other people, stay away from work, and keep your children off school if they've got it for at least 2 days after the symptoms have recovered. So that's one where it absolutely is important to isolate and do what we can to prevent it spreading.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose with all these things, and I know sort of time is limited with the interview, but different things can affect different people. Some people might have a compromised immune system, or no one knows how their body's going to react to certain. So there is that too. I think there is obviously sort of like, trying to get the balance, but for some people, and that could be, who knows, I'm not medically qualified to comment on that, but people who might be sort of compromised or react a certain way to virus. So I think it's got to be taken seriously, Doctor. Do you not think, where people kind of make light of it? But there are people out there that could, it could really affect them in a big way.
This is true. So especially the very young, the very old, and people who have compromised immune systems, things like just simple cold viruses can make people unwell. So absolutely, we need to do what we can to protect those people. And I think what it brings us to, there are some measures we can all take to protect ourselves and others that aren't detrimental to our social situation either. So hand washing is always top of my list. Make sure you're washing your hands before you eat, after the loo, and whenever you go to a new place. So when you arrive at work, when you arrive at home or somebody else's house, give your hands a good wash with soap and water. And the other thing is taking care of our bodies, because our immune systems, for most of us who are pretty healthy, will do a good job, that will keep us in check, and we'll fight this thing off, hopefully within a very short period of time. So that's general measures like a good diet, regular exercise, good sleep, not smoking, not drinking too much, trying to reduce stress, and nasal hygiene as well, which is one that might be new to people. So you're getting into the habit of using nasal sprays or nasal washes every day. Your nose is the first defense when it comes to these common respiratory bugs. So looking after your nasal passages can also help provide additional defense against these common viral bugs.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think the balance as well, and for sure, sort of touching on sort of the changes in behavioural patterns during the pandemic. And I must admit, in the beginning, I sort of went out there and looked at every like vitamin that was going around and until eventually sort of things settled. But I've sort of I keep my levels of D and zinc and C up, and also sort of I'm more cautious around sort of hand. I've kept the hand sanitizer, but I have to admit, Doctor, what really frustrates me sometimes is sort of that sort of balance. Sometimes when you see someone, you might be out for a bite to eat, and they're sneezing and coughing, they leave their tissue on the table, or you see them walk out of a loo, public toilet, they don't wash their hands, type thing, and it's kind of like it's like I know, I'm sure, and like I said, I'm not medically qualified. Some exposure to germs is okay, but surely. And it's also basic etiquette too. I mean, if you're on a train or whatever and you've got someone who's not covering their mouth, and, surely, there's got to be a basic level of etiquette as well too, not just about the germs. This is just basic common decency.
You're absolutely right. And I think this is where our societal etiquette and ideas have shifted somewhat. So I think previously, maybe you wouldn't have thought much of it if somebody left a tissue, but now, we have a certain expectation of people to just be a little bit considerate of how their behaviours affect others. I think, going into work as well, some people can do some of their week working from home, some of their week working in the office. So for those people who can easily work from home, if they're feeling unwell, if they've got a cough or a cold, it absolutely makes sense for them to spend those days working from home. And I think our ideas have shifted, whereas previously we might have thought of them as a bit of a skiver. Now we're much more like to think, oh, how considerate, good for them. They're getting more rest, so they'll get better quicker, but also good for everybody else in the office, on the train or on the bus, who's gonna, benefit from that as well. So I think as well, face coverings, whilst most people don't wear face coverings anymore, which is great. Some people might do to protect themselves if they're vulnerable. But I think we now see more people wearing face coverings if they themselves are ill, as is the norm in Japan, because if you're coughing and sneezing, we all know you're meant to cough the catch and sneeze and then bin it in a tissue or in your elbow. And wearing a face covering essentially does the same. It's not 100%, but it will capture the majority of those larger droplets and reduce the risk of you passing it on to somebody else. So I think you're absolutely right. The societal norms have shifted, and we have expectations of people to just be a little bit more considerate if they're ill, to do what they can, take reasonable steps to protect everybody around them.
No, absolutely. And like what you mentioned there is really interesting, the one about people coming into work. And I mean, whenever I've worked in sport and sports teams, one of my things that really used to sort of like get to me was you might get a player come in and it's almost like a badge of honor. They've got like a flu or a cold coming in train. I'm like, it used to really annoy me, doctor. I'm like, stay home. I don't want the rest of the players coming down what you've got. But not only that, it's like the training's going to be counterproductive. If you're not well, just stay home, rest, relax. And, there's nothing worse than someone coming in, coughing, spluttering, and then all of a sudden you've got, the whole team go down when it could have been prevented. I know there's got to be a balance, to be fair. I'm not suggesting people but I think some of these points are really important points, really, for sure. And anything else that you could sort of add for people listening in terms of, maybe some? I know, like you said, we're going to spring now. There's some nice spring sunshine last couple of days, but anything else that people can do that practically? I mean, I find getting out in the outdoors, and especially when the sun's out like today. Anything that you just to sort of that can help people?
100%. I think it comes back to those lifestyle measures. So, I mean, I mentioned the nasal hygiene, which is one for people to consider. But as you say, being regularly active actually supports a healthy immune system. Being overly active, people who run marathons every weekend to train for ultra marathons, then, there is a point at which too much exercise or a lot of exercise can impact your immune system negatively. But for the majority of us, aiming for that 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise per week will do our immune system a lot of benefit. And I think around the diet, one thing I'd say is people always hear, well, what is a healthy diet? I think if I was to give 2 tips, it would be, firstly, trying to eat the rainbow. We know that fruits and vegetables of different colors have different nutrients. So red fruits and vegetables have different helpful chemicals to green ones, which do to different chemicals to orange ones. So trying to eat the rainbow across the course of the week. If you have children, make it a little game, make it fun, and increasing the amount of fiber in the diet. And I think, to add to that, it's about stress management as well. We know that stress impacts your immune system in a really negative way. And while some stress isn't avoidable, taking small steps to try and manage our stress can make a big difference too.
No, absolutely. And some of those tips you've mentioned there, I do like myself with the make a smoothie and add a few fruits and vegetables in there as well, and the walking as well, mindfulness, and it does make a difference. Doctor, sort of over time. I mean, sometimes you don't see the benefit straight away, but over time, when you sort of look back, you do feel. I mean, there's no panacea, obviously, but you do feel better for it. Absolutely, getting out there for a walk, fresh air.
Yeah.
Bit of mindfulness, get a smoothie going, and they're just sort of basic changes, I think for sure, or you can add in that are quite practical and easy to do. But it's been great speaking to you. So hopefully we sort of there's not too many winter bugs now that we're going in the spring going around. But obviously, these things can be around all times of year. So some great tips there. Thanks for your time, and have a great day.
Thank you. You too. Cheers, Jimmy.